The town meeting members, please take your seats. It is now 7:24. Precinct 1, 5. Precinct 1 has 5. Precinct 2. How many? How many? 13. Precinct 3. Precinct 3 is 9. Well, I'm going to call back again. Precinct 4. Precinct 4 is 14. Precinct 5. Precinct 5 is 10. Precinct 6.
11.
Precinct 6 has 11. Precinct 7. Precinct 7 is 10. Precinct 8. How many? 6? Precinct 8 is 6. And Precinct 1, there was a change. 6. How many is this? 70, how many? There are 79 present. The quorum is 78. Will you please rise and join me in saluting the flag? I pledge allegiance to the flag and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Just so in case a few more people come in and we don't have to challenge a quorum at any time, I'll get rid of the preliminary stuff. Last session. Last session, we convened at 7:23 p.m. with 82 present. Counted votes logged up to a maximum of 107 present. That's present in voting. We still have many items that have been reserved for specific times. Those have not changed. Article 2 is still on the table. The only thing that you should have new, if your precinct chairman has not picked up, there's some pastel purple sheets with everything that's on the overhead projector. I remind you that we did make a motion to start earlier. We did accomplish a lot last session, and the one of the, yes.
Whatever it is, can we start with Article 34 now, please?
I will declare that in a minute, okay? Just making sure everything is in order here before us. I just want to make one other comment. I am going to remind you that if we want to expedite things, while it's proper for me not to, in my ability, not to be able to read your mind, I don't think it's fitting and proper to take up time saying that you agree with somebody else or the previous speaker or something. Only if you can add something to the discussion. And I am going to, tonight, I'm going to try to keep my timer at 5 minutes and not 5 minutes repeated. if there's no objection. Other than that, at this time, we get into Article 34, and I'm going to call on the chairman of the Municipal Regulations Committee if he is present. If he's not, is there any member of the Regulations Committee present? All right, is the town engineer present? Mr. Fian, since you are a non-voting member of town meeting, and this came from your department, I'll recognize you to... That is correct, and is there somebody here? Mr. Smith? Shepherd. We had a Steve Smith and I have a Steve Shepherd, so some one of these days. I would like you to bring the motion on the floor. I believe it is printed in the Finance Committee report. I'll go to whatever page, it's page 63, 64. Down the bottom of page 64. I will... Well, the proper word here is, proper wording would be just to, see that words that say, to see if the town will, in the article, just struck the, and start to amend the Town of Stoughton zoning bylaws and to read as printed in the warrant.
Just say so moved.
I'm not the one supposed to make the motion. Mr. Shepherd.
Article 34, ID 57, amend zoning bylaw entitled Abandonment. That the town will vote to amend the Town of Stoughton zoning bylaw, Section 9, non-conforming uses, structures, and lots, Provision G, entitled Abandonment, and now identified in the Town Code as Section 200-51, which reads as follows.
Abandonment, and that's
As
good.
printed. As printed in the warrant.
Second. On the motion, if this one here is, I'll recognize the building commissioner, Mr. Tom McGrath.
This article is sort of a housekeeping measure in that it became, the members of the zoning board became aware of the fact that the current zoning ordinance regarding the abandonment of non-conforming uses is not compatible with the Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 40A, which defines what cities and towns can do for zoning. By statute, under Chapter 40A, a use is considered abandoned after a period of 2 years. Our zoning ordinance currently has pretty much the same language, but says that a use is abandoned after 1 year. All we're trying to do with this measure is to make our local ordinance conform to Chapter 40A. If we were to leave this on the books and try to enforce it, any applicant could have the decision overturned on the basis that it's not conforming to state law.
Any questions? Mr. Coleman.
Eric Coleman, Precinct 5. What is the difference between abandonment and discontinuance?
I think it's probably, I'm sure there is some definition that a legal mind could draw. To my own mind, there is none.
Counsel? Through you.
Mr. Riley?
Through you, Mr. Moderator, the difference has been developed through case law, and it's now in the general laws as well. Basically, the difference is that to abandon a use requires both physically not doing it and the intention to abandon it. So you could abandon a use over the course of, a week. Discontinue is where you don't use it, and after 2 years, the town can kind of infer that you've abandoned it. So that's the basic difference.
Thank you.
Ms. Brownson? Oh, okay. Any further? Mr. Guerin?
Jim Guerin, Precinct 6. Through you, Mr. Moderator, to whoever can answer it, does this statute give the town any authority to force the owner to do something with this abandoned building?
Mr. McGrath?
If I could answer that through you, Mr. Moderator. No, this just has to do with the fact that if a use or a building is operating under a previous version of the zoning ordinance or from before zoning, it can continue. This would, the abandonment would only apply to something where a use was discontinued or abandoned, and it would no longer be eligible to be used for the non-conforming use. It wouldn't give the building commissioner any additional rights to cite an owner for any particular reason unless it was an unsafe structure.
Mr. Murphy?
Do I still have the floor, Mr. Moderator?
Oh, you still?
I have a
Mr.
follow-up.
Guerin? Still.
Go ahead.
We have a number of buildings in town that are falling in, caving in, and I mean, they're an absolute hazard around the town. And I see them sitting there. I see nothing being done about them. I don't know, this is toothless to me, this kind of business right here. I don't know why we're even bothering with it. Thank you.
What we're talking about here is abandoned non-conforming uses, not abandoned buildings, not buildings that are improperly maintained. Building department is aware of some of the buildings in town that are problematic, and we are dealing with them.
Mr. Murphy?
Peter Murphy, Precinct 2. A couple of years ago, didn't we approve something in this fashion? I thought this came before us.
I've only been with the town, this is my second town meeting, so I'm not aware of anything that happened before last year.
Okay, the other question is, when you say non-conforming, if a building, someone went for an easement on a building, and they're allowed to do whatever the easement said, now the building has been not used for a period of 2 years, does that easement go away, number one? And if it does, are they able to come back and reapply for an easement, or would they have to come back?
I think when you use the word easement, I think what you mean is relief granted by the zoning board. If whatever relief had been granted to someone for a non-conforming use, if that use were discontinued or abandoned for a period of 2 years, the regulations, the grandfathering would be over, and the underlying zoning as far as use regulations would apply.
So what you're saying is the variance would basically go away, after 2 years of it not being used.
I believe that's correct.
All right, hypothetically, we take a business.
Mr. O'Regan, the former chairman of the Zoning Board of Appeals, is shaking his head. Apparently, a variance would outlast abandonment. I think in the case that what we're trying to accomplish here is in cases for, as an example, along Washington Street, most of it is in the general business zones, and automotive uses are no longer allowed. If you have a case where somebody is continuously operating an automotive use, that can continue in perpetuity. If the owner of that property were to discontinue or abandon the automotive use for 2 years, a new applicant would not be able to use that grandfathering of the non-conforming use. He would have to comply with the underlying zoning.
So let's say the automotive business, the owner of it passes away. His family has the property now in the estate. They now go to try to sell the property. Nobody wants to buy it for 2 years, 1 day. They can no longer sell that as an automotive business.
I'm not, they can do whatever they'd like, but a new operator is not going to get a building permit for an automotive use there by the building department as of right.
Would they be able to apply for a variance to get back? I mean, basically, a building would lose its value.
No, they wouldn't, because the zoning board does not grant variances on the basis of use. The property, the property would revert back to the underlying zoning.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Crimmins.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Barry Crimmins, Precinct 4. Excuse me. I applaud Mr. McGrath and it looks like the Selectman and Town Planner, Ms. O'Toole, for putting forth this article. Several speakers have raised questions that, although certainly important, don't really go to the nature of what this article is seeking to do. As Mr. McGrath, or previous speaker, mentioned earlier, this article seeks to clarify an important distinction in the state statute as it relates to the difference between abandonment and discontinuance. And as it states in the definition, abandonment is a subjective analysis. The owner has to have intended to abandon the property. The other thing that it does is, again, as Mr. McGrath indicated, it brings our bylaw as it relates to this issue in compliance with the state statute. Our bylaw talks about abandonment and discontinuance over a 1-year period, and there has been case law that has determined that that is not proper, since the state statute talks about it being a 2-year period. So although our bylaw leaves a lot of room for improvement, and hopefully with the continuing efforts of the Master Plan Committee down the road, hopefully we'll see more extensive revisions to our zoning bylaw that are long overdue. As it relates to this particular issue, this is a step in the right direction. This helps to clarify the definition, and it brings the bylaw into compliance with the state statute. So I would urge you to support it. Thank you.
Any further discussion? If not, I'm going to declare the debate over, and we can vote on the motion. I'm going to take a standing count because this is a zoning bylaw, and it will need a 2/3 vote to pass. Again, I'll summarize it. This is to amend the town bylaws, section 200-51, abandon or discontinuance of a non-conforming use of a structure with definitions for abandonment, and B, for discontinuance, has it been printed in the warrant. All those in favor, please rise, and the chairman take account. Precinct 1.
13.
I take it that your precinct has got some more people. Precinct 2.
17.
Precinct 2 is 17. Precinct 3.
11.
Precinct 3 is 11. Precinct 4.
17.
Precinct 4 is 17. Precinct 5. Precinct 5 is 10. Precinct 6. Precinct 6 is 13. Precinct 7. Precinct 7 is 13. Precinct 8. Precinct 8 is 7. All those opposed, please rise. Precinct 1.
0.
Precinct 1 is 0. Precinct 2. Precinct 2, 0. Precinct 3,
Area 1.
0. Precinct 4. Precinct 4 is 0. Precinct 5. Precinct 5 is 0. Precinct 6. 6 is 0. Precinct 7. Precinct 7 is 0. Precinct 8. 0. 101 to 0, which mean I would say that's pretty darn close to unanimous, and the motion carries. I'm going to call on the town manager for Article 35, public consumption of marijuana and such. It's a Mr. Hartman.
To see if the town will vote to amend the code of the town of Stoughton, Chapter 59, alcoholic beverages, public consumption of marijuana or tetrahydrocannabinol, Article 3, by replacing sections 59-6 through 59-8.
As printed in the warrant. Now, I want to make a note to this regarding our town meeting procedures. The Finance Committee was, referred this to town meeting. The Finance Committee voted to do that. At the time of the public hearing, the petitioner was not present. And when this was at the other committees, your reports have been in the Governmental Relations Committee said to defer the article. Municipal Regulations Committee said to take no action, and the Operations Committee voted to disapprove of this article. Only because primarily the petitioner was not present at the public hearing. Now, how can you really have a public hearing if there is no one to present the issue? And I was at that so-called public hearing that was not issued. If the town meeting as a whole wishes to suspend the rules and allow this to go here, I will have it so recorded. Otherwise, I would actually say that this is not properly in order because it did not conform to our own regulations. And if somebody wants to make a presentation regarding this, fine. Mr. Coleman, do you have a question on this?
Question. Would we be in violation of state statutes if we do not take this up?
The state statute does not tell town meeting what it shouldn't do or should do. Mr. Snyder.
I'd like to move to dismiss this. Second.
On the motion to dismiss, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? I will say it was dismissed, and I'm going to say that motion was by Precinct 2, Mark Snyder. Seven. At this time, we have a precinct.
Can I get a clarification on something?
Yes. In the absence of a positive motion, which was there, but there was a
The question is,
the article was inserted by the board for a petitioner. Can anybody on the floor dismiss an article, or does it have to come from the petitioner or the board? That's the question. As far as the general laws, anybody in this town meeting can make that motion. While it is tradition that should first come from the Board of Selectmen, since they represented it, that is why I asked for Mr. Hartman, as he is your legal representative, and he chose to read what was put in the warrant. I explained the procedures, as you know, town meeting, and if that is why I asked them if they wanted to suspend the rules, and I got no... I just asked him for clarification so everybody understands the rules, that's all. That's right. Thank you. At this time, I recognize for the Board of Selectmen for a presentation from the Capital Outlay Planning Committee. And this has come on at 7:50. I will remove my stuff from the... Mr. Hanson.
I have a request, I think, or maybe a statement here. In view of the amount of time this is going to take, and then I'm sure that this presentation has as much information as the warrant does, can we dispense with the video presentation and the dancing girls and proceed directly to the article?
Well, that's right. No, this town meeting allowed these people to make the presentation. It is relative to what we hear, and that is a committee set up by the Board of Selectmen, so they have the privilege of making the presentation. But I asked them to be very brief on it, and keep it very simple. I know we have copies of what is on there. Some people... Oh, move it.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is a time to be only about 6 minutes presentation. The group you're about to hear from is the Capital and Financial Planning Advisory Committee that the Board of Selectmen approved and formed last September. I'd like to introduce to you Deborah Roberts, who will speak on behalf of the committee. In addition, lined up with them are Bill Manberg and Jay Hudson. Two members of the committee. Alan Olens is another member who could not be with us this evening. And the chairman of the committee is at the Red Sox game. So, Leon Rudman. So without, here we go. Now that her graphics are there for you, you have a handout of this material, and so the purpose of this presentation is to flush out for town meeting where this Capital Planning Advisory Committee is looking to help us get it right. And what I mean by get it right is by looking at what we're buying and how we're spending to acquire these things, to make informed decisions on what we borrow for and what we pay cash for, to look at what we have and how long we keep it. We haven't done that before. So please welcome Deborah Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, Board of Selectmen, and Town of Stoughton residents. My name is Deborah Roberts, Precinct 6, and I'm also a member of the Capital and Financial Planning Committee. The purpose of this presentation is to provide more details on our capitalization policy. But before I start, I would like to introduce the other members of the committee. That is Leon Rudman, he's the chairman, John Hudson, vice chairman, William Mansberg, who's a member, and Alan Owens, who's also a member. We are longtime members or residents of the town of Stoughton. Our children were educated in the Stoughton public school system, and individually, we have over 20 years' experience in accounting, finance, and economics. Last year, the Board of Selectmen appointed us to develop a capitalization policy, and that's because there was not a consistent capital spending approach. We were to take that policy and apply it to different articles, those articles that we're reviewing at town meeting. But before we started our development, we were oriented to historical documents, financial statements, decisions that were made in the past regarding spending approaches. We developed the policy, and it has 6 component parts. One is the capital item must have a cost equal to or greater than $20,000. A capital item must have a useful life equal to or greater than 5 years. A capital item must not be for building. A capital item must not be for equipment repairs and maintenance. Debt financing is to be considered for capital purchases only. Debt financing should not be greater than the useful life of the purchase, but can be less than the useful life. This policy should be consistently followed. We believe in this policy. It's a pay-as-you-go approach. It meets sound business practices based on accounting, finance, and economic industry. It's consistent with other towns and municipalities with the same population and size as the town of Stoughton. It does not burden future taxpayers with current operating expenses. You may not be able to see this exhibit, but you do have a handout that was distributed a couple of weeks ago. But let's use as an example Article 52, which is the school department deferred maintenance request, the $682,000. We voted on this, as a matter of fact, on Monday's town meeting. To ground ourselves, the yellow far right is the Capital and Financial Planning Advisory Committee's funding source, which is to pay cash for that item. The Finance Committee's decision was to borrow, and the initial Board of Selectmen's decision was to pay cash. So that gives you an example of how there could be differences, but if you use the capitalization policy, it would provide some consistency to the approach. As you may recall, for the $682,000, there were various items that we would pay for, like $10,000 itemized paints or landscaping, but as you recall, that's what the makeup of that $682,000 was. Challenges and risk. Our challenge is how to leverage all-time low interest rates without the risk of market timing. I don't believe we should be in the business of predicting if interest rates should go up or go down. We should not jeopardize our current debt or future debt rating. We should be able to acquire the debt that will be necessary to fund high schools, fire station, or our renovated library. We should be able to afford all that we need without a tax override. Creating timely and meaningful 3-year detailed capital budget projections. Determining useful life of assets, such as the police cars. In summary, our capital policy stresses sound business practices with living within our means. That's a pay-as-you-go approach. The primary question we have is, what is the 3 to 5 year budget projection? Thank you very much.
Are there any questions of?
Mr. Moderator?
Mr. Linehan? Mr. I'll yield to.
I'll just make one point. I think that what the Capital Planning Committee is looking to do, can we go back 2 slides, please? Is admirable. I think they have a terrific mission, and I'm looking forward to their work. No, just go one ahead. There, the last 2 items. That's what I thought that they were created to do. So the scope of the committee looks like it's been expanded, but Chapter 44 tells us 30 different ways from Sunday what a capital is. This is a new definition, and all the recommendations of this committee were guided by this one definition. There was no consideration given to the economic outlook, and I'll tell you what, I think that we should be in the business of figuring out what the cost of money is. Today, our last borrowing was 1.88%. 5 to 7 years from now, we're going to be building buildings, it's going to be 5 to 7%. That gets us nothing but added debt. So when we make recommendations, we tell you what the source of funding is and what our plan is, and it's 3 to 5% of total revenues, and it's not to exceed our current paydown rate, et cetera. We have a plan. I love what this committee is going to do. I just think it was premature for them to be making recommendations about what articles should be paid for after the Board of Selectmen voted, after the Finance Committee voted, after the public hearings were held, and after the Finance Committee book was sent out to print. So again, I had to respond because I just didn't feel like the whole story was being told here. So anyways, thank you for your time.
Mr. Linehan.
John Linehan, Precinct 1. I guess I agree that market timing is a reality. I mean, we just heard today that the U.S. government's going to stop buying bonds, right. And you know where interest rates are going to be a year from now. Certainly a lot higher than they are now. I'm not an accountant or an investment advisor, but I think it's common sense. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. I think it's admirable what these guys are doing and long overdue. I really support them. Can we go back to I think it's the first slide? Yes, that one. I'm sorry. One back. Yes. Okay, I think I just had the podium cut off when it said it must not be for building repairs. I suppose that goes with that as well. Yeah, number 3. So I just had a question about that. Anyways, I think these guys are doing great work. Maybe a little bit more refinement, but I think they're well on their way, if not close to done.
Any further comments or questions of the presenters? At this stage, you want to wrap this up?
Thank you very much for the opportunity to present, and I look forward to doing it again next year.
Okay.
Article 36.
Article 36. I'm going to recognize the chairman of the Finance Committee and put on the initial motion. Yep. You are the chairman, right?
I think so. That the town vote to appropriate $60,000 to update the SCADA program and purchase additional licensed software, and that to meet this appropriation, $23,335.44 be transferred from Article 18 of the special town meeting of May 1999, Department 6183. $20,000 $752.12 be transferred from Article 9 of the special town meeting of February 1999, Department 6195, and that the treasurer, with the approval of the Board of Selectmen, be authorized to borrow $15,912.44 under General Law, Chapter 44S, Sections 9, Chapter 44, Sections 7 and 9, or any other enabling authority. The Finance Committee, just to note, directed that this be a sewer enterprise borrowing article.
Does Mr. Batchelor wish to make any presentation on this? Any explanation what it is? Mr. Murphy.
Peter Murphy, Municipal Operations Committee. If you notice, we did not hear this article, and that was not because of Presenter. Presenter was there. Our group did not show up. You as town meeting members, I'm probably stepping out of line here, so you can stop me, but town meeting members, when you are put on a committee, you have an obligation and a duty to fulfill. It's also disrespectful for the presenters to show up and no one's there. For that, I apologize that our group was not there. But for all these articles that our group was not there, if you have been put on a committee, show up. Thank you.
Technically, it would be out of order, but it was order that needed to be out of. Any further discussion? Mr. Batchelor.
This was an article that we had brought up originally last year, kind of fell through the cracks. A number of years ago, we put in a basic SCADA system, which helps us control both our water and sewer needs, pumping stations, sewer pumping stations, water tanks, so forth. With the basic system, if we get a call, we have to send our operators to the building to look on the computer on the second floor to find out what station we have an issue with. That takes away valuable time if we have a serious problem. This article and a future article as well, sewer and water, are to buy software to help us improve this system. We'll be able to monitor our stations with a laptop. Sometimes it definitely will save us valuable time all the time, but some things may be able to be taken care of without even leaving the operator's home. It's definitely a valuable tool.
Any further discussions? If not, I'm calling for the vote. As this is a borrowing, if it's not unanimous, I will ask you to stand and take account. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? I will declare it unanimous on a voice vote. So that is approved. I just have to record this material. Article 37.
That the town vote to appropriate $300,000 to continue improvements of the sewer system to reduce infiltration and inflow, I&I, and that to meet this appropriation, $300,000 be transferred from sewer retained earnings or any other enabling authority.
Any questions or discussion? This is a transfer. It only requires majority vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? I could dare unanimous anyways. Article 38, ID 33, Mr. Hill.
That the town vote to appropriate $90,000 to replace one pump in each station with a high-efficiency pump, and that to meet this appropriation, $90,000 be transferred from the sewer retained earnings or any other enabling authority.
Is there any discussion? There being none, it's a transfer. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The motion carries. Article 39, Mr. Hill.
That the town vote to appropriate $35,000 to replace the 1979 Chevy van, and to meet this appropriation, the treasurer, with the approval of the Board of Selectmen, be authorized to borrow $35,000 under General Law, Chapter 44, Section 7 and 9, or any other enabling authority.
Any discussion? If not, if it's not unanimous, I will require a standing count. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The motion carries. It is unanimous. Article 40, Mr. Hill.
That the town vote to appropriate $60,000 money to upgrade the SCADA program and purchase additional licensed software, and that to meet this appropriation, the treasurer, with the approval of the Board of Selectmen, be authorized to borrow $60,000 under General Law, Chapter 44, Sections 7 and 7C, or any other enabling authority.
Mr. Murphy.
That's why the motion says 60. It was an incorrect number. Thank you. Yeah. And again, this is water versus sewer, so that's why there's two different SCADA systems, and we, the Finance Committee, had recommended to pay for this out of the water enterprise account.
Any further questions? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The motion carries. Be careful. If you're doing that just to be a joke, I will make you stand. And those are the things that take up time that should not have been taken up. Article 41, Mr. Hill.
That the town vote to appropriate $20,000 to replace the Station 1 Muddy Pond Pump Station boiler with a new high-efficiency boiler, and that to meet this appropriation, the treasurer, with the approval of the Board of Selectmen, be authorized to borrow $20,000 under General Law, Chapter 44, Chapter 44, Sections 8 and 7C, or any other enabling authority.
Any discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And all those opposed, I will declare it unanimous. Article 42, Mr. Hill.
Can I say as printed? Sorry. That the town vote to appropriate $24,000 to replace a 1996 pickup vehicle, and to meet this appropriation, $35 be transferred from Article 12 of the special town meeting May 2005 Department 9022, $176.01 be transferred from Article 7 of the special town meeting of December 1999 Department 6163, $441 be transferred from Article 27 of the annual town meeting of May 2005 Department 2019, $30.16 be transferred from Article 35 of the annual town meeting of May 2007 Department 2049, $844.73 be transferred from Article 21 of the annual town meeting May 2008 Department 2054, $1,272 be transferred from Article 27 of the annual town meeting of May 2007 Department 3024, $1,848.33 be transferred from Article 23 of the annual town meeting of May 2008 Department 3119, $15.22 be transferred from Article 43 of the town meeting of May 1998 Department 5705, $1,197.05 be transferred from Article 30 of the annual town meeting of May 2009 Department 5870, $30 be transferred from Article 29 of the annual town meeting of May 2007 Department 8294, and that the treasurer, with the approval of the Board of Selectmen, be authorized to borrow $18,110.50 under General Law, Chapter 44, Sections 8, 7C, or any other enabling authority.
At least I got my bookkeeping caught up.
FinCom recommended this be paid out of the water enterprise account, in addition to all the unpaid, unexpended articles.
They shook out all those piggy banks.
That's right. Yeah, we've made a concerted effort to clean a lot of those up, use them up.
Is there any discussion on this? What it is? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? I will declare it unanimous. Somewhere this can't be going this smooth. Article 43, Mr. Hill.
That the town vote to appropriate $35,000 to design a replacement well at Pratt's Court and associated piping submitted to DEP by our consultants to obtain a permit to install the well, and that to meet this appropriation, the treasurer, with the approval of the Board of Selectmen, be authorized to borrow $35,000 under General Law, Chapter 44, Sections 8 and 7C, or any other enabling authority. And again, we thought that this was a borrowing to be repaid from the water enterprise account.
Any discussion? Mr. DeFelice. Mr. Batchelor, if you've got any.
Mr. Moderator, through to the superintendent. I'm wondering why we're spending money on these wells, given that we're part of the MWRA, and that cost us a $2 million entry fee. So it seems to me that we should be using the MWRA source, no?
When we went with MWRA Water, through you, Mr. Moderator, the discussions that we had were that we would continue to use our wells, that we would continue to use town water and not just use MWRA water. Out of all of our stations, this one is a treatment plant. And at some point in the future, I'm sure you're going to see more than one treatment plant in Stoughton. Hopefully it's going to be a ways away, but we definitely want to keep up with this one.
In this one in particular, could you tell us where the plume of groundwater pollution is relative to this well? I know that it's been a concern that it's been inching its way closer and closer to the Pratt's Court well, and it looks like we're going to drill another well, I guess, adjacent to it. What is the concern, if any, of that plume of...
The test wells that we have done so far there's been no issue.
Well, I know they're not contaminated now, but
No.
do we know where that plume is still coming downstream to this area?
Well, it is, but the majority of it is not going in this direction, it's going the other way. We still have good water down there without any problems.
Okay. One of my concerns is that over time, we may be investing in it. Perhaps we should be investing in maybe a well in another area that's not near the source of pollution. I'm just worried that we spend some money here and then, 5 or 10 years down the road, the plume is...
What we have is, as I say, it is a treatment plant. If in the future we decide that we're going to abandon the well that is involved with this station, it does not mean that we will not use the station, because that water could be, we could treat water from Station 2, Station 3, Station 4. In the future, it may be going in that direction, and we would abandon this well completely if necessary.
And it's still used the
Station
same.
1 also, Muddy Pond goes right by this, so it's definitely a use for the town that you're not going to want to give up.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Coleman.
Eric Coleman, Precinct 5, just a comment. I don't know if it was a couple years ago, there was a problem with the MWRA water, and we were told a lot of the towns couldn't use their water. Then we find the town of Stoughton, yes, we can use it because we've got these other wells. They shut off the water from the MWRA, and we were fine. So I think this is a good way to go.
That is correct.
Any further discussion? Mrs. Camacho?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. On the motion, that the town vote to appropriate $35,000 to design a replacement well at Pratt's Court and associated piping. And this is where I have a problem. Submitted to DEP by our consultants. So does this mean that we've already taken these actions and we've actually had the work completed prior to the appropriation? Or should there be different wording here? Because it doesn't make sense.
No, it hasn't been completed.
If it hasn't been completed, then it should have something else in the wording here. To be submitted, I would think we'd have to insert here that the town vote to appropriate the X number of dollars to design the well and associated piping to be submitted, I would think, because it hasn't been submitted.
If that's what we need to do, I'm in complete agreement with that.
Well, through you, Mr. Moderator, to you, Mr. Moderator, would you agree with the fact that wording should be changed?
I think now, I read that the same way, as like there was something missing. So if there's no objection, that's only two words that clarify. I don't consider this a major change. Does the maker of the motion agree to that? Mr. Hill?
Yes, yes,
All right.
yes.
Just add the words "to be" between piping submitted.
Am I okay to leave? Thank you.
Any other? Very important to do that. Any further discussion? All right, I will read this whole thing in its entirety, but it's not as long, just because we made that change. All right, I'll do the short version, and that is to appropriate $35,000 to design a replacement well at Pratt's Court and associated piping to be submitted to the DEP by our consultants, et cetera, and to meet this appropriation, the treasurer, with the approval of Board of Selectmen, be authorized to borrow $35,000 under the proper borrowing authority. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? I will declare it unanimous. I just want to note here that it was amended. Article 44, Mr. Hill.
That the town vote to appropriate $100,000 to replace undersized and unlined water mains, and that to meet this appropriation, the treasurer, with the approval of the Board of Selectmen, be authorized to borrow $100,000 under the General Laws, Chapter 44, Section 8, Paragraph 7C, or any other enabling authority. And again, we recommended this be repaid from the water enterprise accounts.
Any discussion? There being none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Again, I'll declare it unanimous. Article 45, Mr. Hill.
That the town vote to appropriate $165,000 to replace and/or purchase the following equipment for the Highway Department. Replace 1971 sidewalk tractor, $130,000. Replace 1989 4x4 cab with rack, $35,000. And to meet this appropriation, the treasurer, with the approval of the Board of Selectmen, be authorized to borrow $165,000 under General Law, Chapter 44, Section 7, Paragraph 9, or any other enabling authority.
Any question? If not, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? I heard it. All those in favor, please rise, and the chairman take account. Somebody made that, I have to have it on record. It needs a two-thirds vote. Because I haven't, this time. It isn't a matter of, under the statute which allows me to do that, it has to be locally adopted, so. If that person wishes to withdraw that nay, I will say it's unanimous. Precinct 1. Precinct 1 is 13. Precinct 2. Precinct 2 is 15. Precinct 3. Precinct 3 is 15. Precinct 4. 15. Precinct 5. Precinct 5 is 10. Precinct 6. Precinct 6 is 11. Precinct 7. Precinct 7 is 13. Precinct 8. Precinct 8 is 8. All those opposed, please rise. Precinct 1. 0. Precinct 2. 0. Precinct 2, 0. Precinct 3. 0. Precinct 3, 0. Precinct 4. 0. Precinct 4 is 0. Precinct 5, 0. Precinct 6. 1 and 1. Precinct 3, Precinct 7. Precinct 7, 0. Precinct 8. Precinct 8 is 0. 100 yes, 1 no. It is approved.
One abstain.
The reason, people do have a right to make a vote, and they have to have it recorded. Mr. Hill, Article 46.
That the town vote to appropriate $35,000 to repair several major leaks in the office building located at 950 Central Street, and that to meet this appropriation, $35,000 be transferred from free cash.
Simple majority vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, I will declare it, and it's unanimous. Moving right along.
Yeah. That was the DPW building, by the way.
What's that? Mr. Gito, did you want to? Please come.
Could we not just say, as printed, the warrant for this next one?
I will allow that.
Thank you, Mr. Gito. I was just about to go get a Mountain Dew.
Okay. Mr. Hill, do a short version, just so I know that we read the name, title, the top and the bottom line.
That the town vote to appropriate $54,000 to upgrade the existing water meter reading recording system to include software and hardware, and that to meet this appropriation, the following transfers from unexpended articles be made,
As printed in the
and that
law.
the treasurer, and with the approval of the Board of Selectmen, be authorized to borrow $5,664.79 under General Law, Chapter 44, Section 8, Paragraph 7C, or any other enabling authority.
Any discussion? If not, oh, yes, Mr. Crimmins, Mr. Soares first. All of a sudden, we have people.
Joe Soares, Precinct 2. Why was the Finance Committee's vote 8-5?
Mr. Hill?
Is that it? I honestly don't recall, Mr. Soares.
Is there anybody that does recall?
Mr. Guerin?
Mr. Guerin.
Can you answer that?
I'm one of the 5 that voted against this, and I voted against it because I didn't agree with the borrowing on it. I do agree with the article, however. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Crimmins? Mr. Crimmins.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Barry Crimmins, Precinct 4. Through you, Mr. Moderator, to the superintendent. These borrowing articles, and I realize are being repaid from the water enterprise account, but will it be anticipated that these will result in increases in the water fees? Or was that in part of the recent vote that the selectmen took to increase those fees?
Anything that voted tonight would not be part of that. If any increases were going to be made, it would be next year, I believe.
Okay, thank you.
It's not necessarily that they will be increased because of some of them, because this article alone will make us more efficient in a number of different areas to try and actually save some money.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Moderator, if I may, through you to the Finance Committee Chairman. These various articles, and I applaud the committee for its efforts, and as the chairman has said, cleaning up a lot of these old articles. Just as a point of clarification, does that money actually exist somewhere?
Mr.
It's in the bottom drawer in Bill Rowe's office.
That I would believe.
And I've had to put a lock on it from department heads, let me tell you. No, yeah, this is if we have a project, let's say, for example, that we were authorized to borrow 10,000, we actually borrow 9,500 and comes in at, the actual cost comes in at 9,250. We've got 250 left over in unspent borrowed proceeds, so.
So like even these $5 items, the money does actually exist?
Yeah, actually, yeah.
Okay, thank you. And finally, if I may, through you, Mr. Moderator, to the accountant, I wasn't quick enough to get up on the last article, but it's more of a point of information. Can we get an updated figure on the free cash based on the articles approved to date?
Yeah, we've used $1,664,168 in free cash, and we have a balance remaining of $1,613,092. We also have $294.02 remaining to be raised in the tax levy.
Okay, so the balance figure was $1,613,092?
Correct.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Any further discussion on this?
Just a
If
point,
not,
just a point of information, Mr.
Mr.
Moderator.
Hill.
If folks want to look at page 18, 19, 20 in their book, you'll see all those unexpended articles that we used, the list that came from. We grayed out the ones that we've been using for these articles, just as information for you.
On the motion, and I'm not going to read it either. Article 47, ID 54, upgrade water meter reading recording system, and that is to appropriate $54,000 and several transfers from various sources, and then to borrow, is that $5,664.79 under general laws, chapter 44, etc. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? I will declare it unanimous.
Mr. Moderator, if I could just take a moment.
Yes, John.
I'd like to thank Town Meeting, Board of Selectmen, Finance Committee, and all the subcommittees for always working with Public Works. I appreciate all your support and everything that you do for us at Town Meeting. Thank you very much.
Yeah, just so that we don't think we've lost some numerical sequence on our proceedings here, Articles 48 to 53 were acted upon in the June 17 session, so we now head to Article 54, and I will recognize the Chairman of the Finance Committee.
That the town vote to appropriate $133,000 to pay for repairs to the Town Hall, Historical Society Building, and the Senior Center, and to meet this appropriation, the treasurer, with the approval of the Board of Selectmen, be authorized to borrow $133,000 under General Laws, Chapter 44, Section 7, Paragraph 3A, or any other enabling authority.
Is there any discussion? Do I see somebody? If not, I'm just a little surprised. Is there any? No, I just, I have one question on this. I don't see a list of what is itemized generally for, whether that was an omission or whether it's...
No, it's in the appendix, Mr.
Oh,
Moderator.
okay. Then if it's in the appendix,
Page 213. Oh, that's not it, sorry. Article 54, 214, sorry.
okay. I
Right.
just want to make a notation here.
You
on the
notice the
record.
request was for $165,000, and that the town building supervisor retracted the town hall article for replacing roofs on offices, et cetera, so, ceilings, as opposed to roofs.
Okay, on the motion, which is to appropriate $133,000 and to borrow that amount, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Again, it's unanimous. Article 55.
That the town vote to appropriate $60,000 to pay for all activities associated with and required by the state regarding compliance with the EPA Storm and Waters NPDES regulations, and that to meet this appropriation, $60,000 be transferred from free cash.
Is there any discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The motion is carried, is unanimous. Mrs. Hill, please come to the microphone, just.
Anita Hill, Precinct 2, Chairman, Intergovernmental Relations Committee. I probably am out of order also, but I would just like to add my 2 cents worth, that, again, if you see on the notes here, that my committee did also not show up for this. Therefore, at the public hearing, we couldn't discuss it, we couldn't vote it, and we had to defer to the Finance Committee. I'm going to just echo Peter's words. If you're on a committee, please come to the meetings. The meetings start in March, and they run until they're done. So please make yourself available. Thank you.
Article 56, Mr. Hill.
That the town vote to appropriate $10,000 for the purchase of digital aerial imagery to be procured jointly through the Massachusetts Ortho-Imagery Consortium, and that to meet this appropriation, $10,000 be transferred from free cash. Ortho-Imagery.
Is there any discussion? Ms. Bronston.
I find that this could be very dangerous technology. This was invented by the U.S. Department of Defense for military tactical strategy. I suspect that under the Convention of Biological Diversity that requires that the United States give away our technology to developing countries such as Russia and China, that's why this foolishly got out into the world. You can go onto these maps and find out a target list of places that you want to bomb. You can interact. You can sit in the privacy of your home, down in your basement, and find out. All you need is a computer, the GIS software, a GPS map. It will give you your longitude and latitude so that you can bomb up whatever thing you want to choose. This is highly dangerous technology. I would like to see, because the assessors need, and other people in the town need to use this technology, that we have a motion to anyone who needs to use it, it must be used within the confines of the town hall. People who are using it, who work for the town and need to use it for part of their job, that they get a security clearance. That the internet, that the map cannot be uploaded to the internet. So, you know, I don't know if you'd like to have any other discussion about whether that's a good idea or a bad idea. You don't care about that? You don't see this as a danger? I'd like to hear your opinion.
Mr. DeFelice?
Well, I'll give you an opinion. I think that these devices are certainly beginning to infringe on our Fourth Amendment rights. And in my little handy book of the Constitution, I'll just briefly read it, because if you've looked at any of the Bill of Rights, which are the first 10 amendments, they're very, very brief. Founding Fathers didn't have a problem with being concise so that you knew how they felt and what they were talking about. Amendment number 4, the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrants shall issue but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, in particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. Right now, hopefully most of you folks have been keeping up with what's going down in Washington, D.C. Our rights are being trampled on, First Amendment, Second Amendment, and Fourth Amendment. If you're not aware of what's going on, especially to people of the press, where what's too much? Trying to defend our rights is too much, and no one wants to hear that? Please.
Mr. DeFelice, you...
No, I'm sorry.
You still have about 1 minute and 21 seconds.
Okay. So my point is, when things are being searched, basically, in this case, overhead, it mentions, as I did earlier, you're supposed to be secure also in your home. So there's no need of people collecting data as they are down in Washington, just data mining every possible source that they can do. Look what the IRS is doing. You think that's a good idea? Look what they're doing to some of the newspapers. Do you think that's a good idea? So the point is, it's about time, and maybe it's, you know, Stoughton is supposed to be the birthplace of democracy. Maybe it's about time that we stand up and say, maybe this is the place we say, no mas. Enough is enough. If there's a cause that you need information, and you go out and get a warrant and go to that house if you think there's something that you need to see, or search or seize. But some of the stuff is getting just out of hand and out of control. Thank you.
Mrs. Carrara.
Stephanie Carrara, Precinct 2, move the question.
It's a cut-off debate. I just should remind people on some of this subject, some of these things are related to policies that are developed by Board of Selectmen and other departments, and that's the proper place to address it. And this is really an appropriation for using a tool in the town government. And again, that's to appropriate $10,000 to purchase digital aerial imagery to be procured jointly through the Massachusetts Ortho Imagery now I couldn't say consortium, and that to meet this appropriation, $10,000 be transferred from free cash. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? No. You know what? I'm going to take a count. All those in favor, please rise, and I have it on record. No, I've cut off debate. This is on the motion. Precinct 1.
8.
Precinct 1 is 8. Precinct 2. Precinct 2 is 15. Precinct 3. Precinct 3 is 12. Precinct 4. Precinct 4 is 15. Precinct 5. Precinct 5 is 9. Precinct 6. Precinct 6 is 10. Precinct 7. Precinct 7 is 12. Precinct 8. Precinct 8 is 5. All those opposed, please rise. Precinct 1.
2.
Precinct 1 is 2. Precinct 2. Precinct 2 is 1. Precinct 3. Precinct 3 is 1. Precinct 4. Precinct 4 is 0. Precinct 5. Precinct 5 is 0. Precinct 6. Precinct 6 is 3. Precinct 7. Precinct 7 is 1. Precinct 8. Precinct 8 is 3. 86 yes, 11 no. The motion is carried. No, it's a simple majority vote. I took that. I'll repeat it again. 86 yes. There was doubt in my mind. So rather than challenge it, we have it on record. Article 57, I recognize the town manager.
Move to dismiss.
On the motion to dismiss, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, the motion to dismiss is carried. Article 58, town manager.
Also move to dismiss.
On the motion to dismiss, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion is dismissed. Article 59. I believe the Finance Committee Chairman can summarize this. Motion.
I think I have to read it. I don't know if I can summarize this.
All right, go to it.
That the town will vote to authorize the Board of Selectmen to petition the general court to the end that legislation be adopted precisely as follows. Amend the fourth sentence of Section C, Chapter 86 of the Acts of 1911 as amended by Section 3 of Chapter 165 of the Acts of 1954 and as further amended by Section 1 of Chapter 583 of the Acts of 1981 to reinsert the word 5 in place of the word 10 in lines 21 and 29, and to insert the same lines after the words 10% per annum, the words or at the election of the town at a rate equal to 2% above the rate of interest chargeable to the town for the betterment project to which the assessments relate. And further to amend Section 7 of said Chapter 86 to strike out in line 10 the word 10 and reinsert the word 5, and to insert after the words 10% per annum the words or at the election of the town at a rate equal to 2% above the rate of interest chargeable to the town for the betterment project to which the assessments relate, provided that the general court may make clerical and editorial changes of form only to the bill unless the Board of Selectmen approves amendments to the bill prior to the enactment of the general court, and to authorize the Board of Selectmen to approve such amendments which shall be within the public purpose of the petition or take any other action relative thereto.
Mr. Fian, do you wish to explain this?
Mr. Moderator, Ben Fian, Town Engineer. Quick explanation, and it goes back to the town's Sewer Enabling Act, which was originally published in 1910. And then it was amended in the 50s. It was amended in 1981. And in 1981, that amendment changed the borrowing rate and established it at the state level as 10%. Once the state established it, the only way to change it again is to go back to the state. The only reason we can think why they did that in 1981 is at that time the interest rates were up in the high teens, and maybe 10% looked good then. But obviously, since then, it's been really a hindrance to any substantial sewer construction in the town, and it provides a hardship on the people involved in paying for the sewers. So, the purpose of the article is to authorize the selectmen to go back to the state and amend that 10% down to 5%, or as it's worded, 2% above the borrowing rate. The last time I inquired as to what that would be, 2% above the borrowing rate, I was told it was 4.5%. So essentially we're talking about 5% as a rate, which is a lot more reasonable than 10. So I would ask that the town meeting would approve this article. Thank you.
Mr. Lurie?
David Lurie, Precinct 6. I just had a question about 2% over the base rate, or however it was termed. What if our rates go above 10%? Then we're paying 12, 13, 14%? Or is 5% better language because it locks in 5%? That's my only question, Mr. Moderator. That's all right. That's all right.
We just had a little interruption here.
That's okay. So the question is 2% above the prime rate a disadvantage if our rates become a runaway situation and they become actually above 10%, where we could potentially end up paying 12, 13, 14% instead of locking in 5%?
Well, my understanding is that this does lock in the 5%.
It does. It's not 2% above prime rate
Well,
or
it
something
looks
like
like it gives the town the option of one or the other.
Okay. Well, my question then is the selectmen planning to move in a direction of 2% above per prime rate, or are they going to lock in a fixed rate of 5% or lower?
I would have to ask, can somebody from the Board of Selectmen answer that question? Since you are the Water and Sewer Commissioners.
Well, to be honest with you, we haven't had a lot of discussion on where the rates would go. Right now, what did happen was we tried to offer relief for one project that had sewerage done, and we offered to go down to 5% over 20 years. We voted that, and 3 days later, we were told, no, you can't do that. The law says you have to be at the 10%. What this does is give you a bit more flexibility. So we're trying to be fair to the residents or the businesses that would be paying for this. But at the same time, if you're borrowing money to do this, I think you have to evaluate where you are at that time. So I wouldn't say that you'd never be just using the 2% above the rate, but we're certainly looking to try and offer relief as much as we can to the residents that are going to be using this.
Mr. Moderator, to the previous speaker, if you had the flexibility, but it sounds like the last time we had a discussion with the state was in 1981, unless it was, what, maybe 10 years ago, 15, 20 years ago? If it was a long period of time that you end up locking in these rates, and the rates over the next 3 years go out of control, where are we going to be if we're 2% above that prime rate? That's my question. How often can we change the situation with the state? Are we going to be locked into 2% above prime? Or are you saying we could renegotiate with the state because of the fact that we're stuck at 2% above prime at 12, 13, or 14%? And how do you get back to 5%? You can't get back to even 10% at that point.
Mr. Feaster, could you come down?
Joseph Feaster, Precinct 4. I just wanted to clarify that the language in this particular article states that it's at a rate equal to 2% above the rate of interest chargeable to the town for the betterment project. It has nothing to do with the prime rate. So that gives the flexibility for it to be either the amount, 2% above the amount that's charged to the town to do the assessment, or the 5%. So it's not the prime rate. Excuse me? No, I'll give the example that's being talked about here. Say, for instance, the interest, as I read this, if the interest rate went to 7%, and at that particular point in time, because we were faced with this while I was interim town manager. We tried to do a project, we had to do the 10%. The Board of Selectmen voted to try to give a break to the residents because because they're going to be attached to the sewer system. Their hands were tied because of the statute. What this says, so if we went to the 7%, and if we said, and that's what the town would be charged in order to do that, they would then say, well, they could go up to the 2%. This gives the 2% or the 5%. They can then say the rate that we're going to charge for this particular project to when people are trying to attach to the sewer is 5%. That's how I read it. So that would be the example, and anyone can correct me if I'm wrong, but that's how I read this legislation. That was the intent of trying to give the flexibility to the Board of Selectmen in order to address any of the types of concerns financially for the residents.
If somebody has another.
Mr. Moderator, that's exactly what the article is looking at. It's giving you, for instance, last night we authorized the treasurer to borrow $2.4 million based on last year's warrant articles. The rate was 1%. 1% on it, right? 1%. 1% we did last night. I just had to check because it was so recent I might have forgot. So that if there was a project in there and we borrowed the money at 1%, we would actually be allowed to take the alternative instead of doing 5 and give relief and say we'll go to 2% above what we borrowed and put that interest at 3%.
So
you could go below the 5. Because it's not based on a set rate, it's based on the rate you're getting at the time you're borrowing.
Mr. Moderator, to the previous speaker, so if I understand this, at any point in time in the future, we have the ability to look at either scenario to find so 5 would be our worst case scenario. So if we ended up, if it was 2 plus the 1, we're at 3. We can go with 3 or 5, depending on which is better at any given point in time in the future?
Yeah, yes, but if we were borrowing at 10, we're not going to look to do it out at 5. I think that would be an assessment that had to be made, whether you're going to be at the 5 or do you need to go above what you're borrowing. The town is borrowing the money. That would be the flexibility you're given. It's not locking it in. That's what happened to us now, is it's locked in at a rate. We don't have any choice. This will give you the choice to either go with the 5, that's what it's changing it to, is 5, which is a set rate, but it's also going to give you the flexibility that if you're borrowing at a much lower rate, you would be able to pass that along to the people of the town.
Okay, Mr. Moderator, my last question. So our worst case scenario is 5%?
No, the worst case scenario would be 2% above whatever rate you got. So if the interest rates were to go up sky high again and the town is borrowing at 10%, do we offer it at less? I guess that would depend on the actual financial conditions the town was in at the time that was happening. But it would give you that ability to stay below the 10%. If you're borrowing at 10, if you borrow money at 10 and you're lending it out to somebody else, do you usually lend it out at less? I mean, that's what you would have to evaluate on what the financial condition of the town was.
Mr. Hill, could you make an explanation?
The specific language in the motion says
or at the election of the town at a rate equal to 2% above the rate of interest chargeable to the town for the betterment project to which the assessment relate. So if the charge to the town, we had to borrow at 12%, we could charge 14. Is that
Yes.
correct? Okay.
It would allow that, yes.
So there's no ceiling on this.
All right. Well, the way I sense, based on my understanding of where we are, is that we're at a fixed amount of 10%. And there's an option to be able to get at 5% and just ignore any other option that, no. If 5% were something we can go to the state and say, could we lock in at 5 instead of 10, long-term, it seems to me that at least we know where we're guaranteed to be at for the people who need to put in a project, that they end up having to pay a certain rate. And then whatever we end up having to charge them, so be it, but at least we're starting from a floor of 5%.
No, it wouldn't be whatever you charge them. If you set this at 5%, that would be all you could charge them. And if you had to borrow the money at 10, what project are you going to do where you're going to be having to borrow money at twice the rate what you can collect back for it?
Oh, so you're saying if the cost of money is 12% today, we're losing 2%? Is that what you're saying?
Right now, it's a set rate at 10%, and it's a 10-year period.
Okay, thank you. I'm good.
Mr. Crimmins. Mr. Linehan.
I'm not comfortable with the either-or. With all due respect to our current Board of Selectmen, they can lead to who knows who in the future, and I think there should be equal treatment under the law. So I would like to see the motion modified to reflect one or the other, or something set. I think set and predictable. And I would opt towards the 2% above, because the town of Stoughton is not a bank. So we can facilitate people, but if they can get a loan cheaper somewhere else, good for them.
Somebody else? Mr. Erdem?
Maybe part of the confusion is, maybe this question can resolve part of the confusion. So if somebody were to get the sewer project started, would their interest rate change for that particular project over the next 10 years? Or this is for the change is going to apply to new projects?
I would believe, it would be my understanding if you were to approve a project and you borrow the money to do that project, that money is going to be borrowed at a certain rate. That's what you would be basing it on. The situation we're in today is that we are at a set rate, and we have absolutely no way to change it unless we go through this and petition the legislature. What this did was, to me, gave you the best opportunity to set a rate, which cut the rate that's in there now in half, and still give you the ability to offer a benefit to anybody that had a project going on. And as I said, for an example, we borrowed $2,408,000 last night for last year's warrant articles, and that was done at 1%. If there was a project that was being proposed last year for sewer that we just borrowed on, it would give us the ability to go to 3%, which is a lot better than the 10 we would have to do if we kept if we did not petition this and kept the law intact that we have today. We have no choice. And it happened to this board, and it's happened more than once, but it did happen to the board where a section of the community that had a project done came to us for some relief because the assessments that were there had to be done at 10%. And we tried to double the time they had to pay and cut the rate in half. That's what we were trying to do to help them out, and we were willing to do it. We voted to do it. And then we were told we couldn't do it. So, I mean, to me, it gives you the ability to be as fair as possible to anybody that's got a project going. It gives the town the ability to, I think, undertake more projects. If the money is good, you can take on the projects, and you don't have to charge the exorbitant rate you're at today.
Just as a follow-up, if somebody were to start a project today, and the money would have been borrowed at today's interest rate plus 2% under the worst-case scenario, so that rate would be locked for that person for that project. I think that's, people are concerned about the uncertainty, but this is not like an adjustable rate.
No, as maybe I wasn't clear, but if you had a project approved and you borrow the money to do the project, that money is borrowed at a certain rate, and that's what you would be basing your assessment on. If I'm wrong, I'm sure the town manager would straighten me out, but if we had a $5 million project and we borrowed the money like we did last night at 1%, it would allow you to charge up to 2% more. It's not mandatory you go to the 2, it allows you to go up to that. So you can actually take into account what the financial status of the town is, and you could even, maybe you cut it down and only go to 2% instead of the 3. But it gives your leadership the ability to be as fair as possible to anybody that has that project coming that way, in my humble opinion.
Mrs. Colburn.
Pat Colburn, Precinct 4. This was my subcommittee. I just want to add that, what everybody said is correct. All this does is allow the selectmen the flexibility of saying we can either charge 5% or 2% above what it costs the town. What I did want to say, though, is this article was a bear to get the wording accurate on. There was legal counsel, there was back and forth. In my opinion, this is not the article to make changes to on the floor of town meeting. I mean, we're here because last year we tried to pass an article that did not go through the legislature. This was not an easy one to get accurate wording on, so unless you really feel strongly, I would ask you not to mess with the wording on this article. Thank you.
Mr. Coleman. Mr. Feaster.
Mr. Moderator, Joseph Feaster, Precinct 4. I just returned to the podium once again just to draw an analogy for folks because I feel so strongly about this particular article. The effort here is to help the citizens of this town. As the previous speaker said, we were faced with this situation whereby we wanted to provide relief to a certain development in the town, and we were constrained in order to be able to say you can only charge them this amount. While I hear the concerns of some of the previous speakers about giving, if you will, powers to the Board of Selectmen to make the decision, I think that it has been evidenced in this town previously that the efforts are to help the citizens of this town and to give the flexibility to be able to say that fine, if the rates are in such a manner that it would be preferable in order to charge a 5%, that would be appropriate. But in other cases whereby if you can give relief to the people of the town when they have to do the sewer connections to an amount that's only 2% over the amount that you borrow it, I think that this that we as a town meeting should vote for this.
Mr. Coleman.
Eric Coleman, Precinct 5. It says here, be sincere, be brief, be seated. I move the question.
As to cut off debate, as this has been a long article, on the motion to cut off debate, say aye. Aye. All those opposed? On the question, which is to vote this petition to the general court, it only requires a majority vote, and I'm certainly not going to read it again so I can confuse it more. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. All those opposed? I'm going to declare it a vote. I don't have to record, in this case, a discrepancy. It's just by a voice vote. And okay. Under Article 60, our Assistant Town Engineer, Mark Tisdale, has asked for a presentation, and this has to do with hiring a traffic consultant. Is this a PowerPoint?
Okay. Yes. Here.
Mr. Tisdale?
Good evening. Mark Tisdale, Assistant Town Engineer. I'll read the article. To see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate transfer from available funds in the Treasury, if any, and or borrow a sufficient sum of money to pay for the hiring of a qualified consultant to provide traffic-related engineering analysis, design, and surveying services, or take any other action relative thereto.
That is not a motion, that's the article for our information. The motion will come from the Finance Committee Chairman. But that's fine, it gives us what we're talking about. Go ahead.
Continue? Okay. Again, my name's Mark Tisdale, I'm the Assistant Town Engineer. This article is to hire a traffic consultant. Excuse me. It should only take about 2 minutes for this presentation, it's not long. A little background. Sorry about that. A little background. Previous town manager formed a traffic safety task force in response to a death of a young girl last September, I believe. Since then, several short-term fixes have been implemented in that school area. Removal of a crosswalk, a long crosswalk, an addition of another crosswalk, extension of a sidewalk, and a couple other small fixes inside the school. The task force continues to meet roughly every month or two to discuss various traffic safety issues. Recently, we've combined forces with the Bicycle and Pedestrian Safety Task Force and the Sidewalk Committees and we formed the Transportation Task Force. It's all linked together, it's all the same thing, so we figured it would be a benefit of the town to join forces. Our number one goal is really to just protect the town. The task force includes representatives from the police, fire, public works, engineering, planning, schools, recreation, youth commission, redevelopment authority, and the Old Colony Planning Council. Projected use of funds. Our number one priority is to come up with 25% design plans for the intersections from the West and Central Street intersection to the Island Street intersection up to Tosca and Canton. The analysis will also include the school sites in the area. Existing traffic studies, including studies from the Old Colony Planning Council, which we have many of, will be used in the preparation of the design. We're trying to limit the number of studies since we have so much information. We actually want to get things done with this article. One of the biggest points of this presentation is that if the town pays for the design costs for any transportation improvement, the state will actually, and we come up with the design plans, the state will actually pay 100% of the cost once we're on the transportation improvement program. They call it the TIP for short. So, for instance, this project could cost, depending what we do, $3 to $5 million, and you know, that would be paid for if we pay for the design. This is the, like I said, this is to get us 25% design plans. There will be public input on this. We'll probably have a couple different schemes we'll show to the town. But I want to be clear that this will not be the final amount of funds for the project. There'll be more funds required for the design. Ooh, that doesn't look so good, does it? All right, well, this was supposed to be a map that shows the project area, Central West Street intersection, the Island Street, Central Street intersection, and the Tosca Drive, Central Street, Kent intersection. Fortunately, I'm sorry that the image is not showing. It looked good on the computer today. Oops. Okay, priority number 2, we want to use these funds also, that a partial amount of the funds we want to use to analyze and adjust signal timing at several problem intersections. There are some intersections that we have right now with signals that just, if we just adjust the timing and make it a little more efficient, the level of service will increase in the intersection. Examples would be Central and Pearl, Central Pleasant, Central Lincoln, and Central and Turnpike. There could be others included in this. And lastly, in support of the article is the police chief, Paul Chastney, the town planner, Noreen O'Toole, the town engineer, Ben Fian, the superintendent of public works, John Batchelder, the fire chief, Mark Doloff, the superintendent of schools, Dr. Marguerite Rizzi, the school committee, director of the youth commission, Karen Hall, director of recreation department, John Dennison, and the master plan committee and redevelopment authority, Forrest Linwall. And lastly, again, we are requesting $75,000. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
As a matter of procedure, Mr. Hill, will you please read the motion from the Finance Committee?
That the town vote to appropriate $75,000 to pay for hiring of a qualified consultant to provide traffic-related engineering analysis, design, and surveying services, and to meet that appropriation, $75,000 be transferred from free cash.
Do we have any questions? Looks like we have a lot. Mr. Hanson.
Where in the appendix was this, all this data? I looked, I couldn't find it. Could you just tell me what page it was on? Somewhere, verbatim in the book. Is there a page? I didn't find it.
This PowerPoint did not make the publication of this book.
Okay. I know we've had surveys, traffic and all kinds of things ad nauseum forever. Those intersections that were pointed out in there certainly can use some work, whether it's different timing of the lights or different control system and traffic sensors. The only difficulty I have, I don't have the difficulty with the amount, I don't have the difficulty with the intersections that need to be worked on. My only difficulty is that is not chiseled in stone here, so that 75,000, we're voting on very nebulous things in the thing. And that's my biggest concern, not the amount, not the need, just the vagaries or the vagueness of this article, because there is no equivalent printed data that we could actually look at until just now. Thank you.
Mr. Coleman.
Eric Coleman, Precinct 5. Can you go back to that 25%? I don't really understand what that is. Maybe the second slide. Yeah, that out there. What does that mean?
Yeah, that's a phrase that's used in conjunction with this TIP program that I'm talking about. There are certain steps along the line with design plans, the 25% design plans, they have 75% design plans and 100% design plans. 25% design plans are a step above a preliminary plan.
All right, so it's a little more than a vague idea as to what we're doing, we want to have done.
It gives you a good idea of what we're doing.
Okay. Second thing, well, this is something that the master plan looked at, and I think they wanted some kind of a traffic study or consultant. On the state reimbursement, with this do you anticipate the $75,000 to be reimbursed in full by the state?
No, that's only for construction costs.
So this would be ours, the rest of it would be, we wouldn't have to pay anything for it?
Correct.
That's enough for me. Thank you.
Mr. DeFelice.
Some of these intersections are of interest to myself, especially where I live down in the area of West Stoughton. But what we're forgetting or overlooking, there's a approved 40B project that's, as soon as somebody wants to pick up the ball, they could start tomorrow to develop across from the Hanson School. A few of us, and I would say only a few of us, attended those meetings and tried to fight the fight, but with the 40B, you don't get much of anything. However, some of the things that were agreed to by the development were part of the conditions that they were to redesign the intersection at West and Central. Also, in that plan, it includes extending West Street into the project, almost going straight across the road. So we have to be kind of careful, at least in that area, as to what we do and what we start designing, because there's already been a design. And right now, if we were to go in there and do something, the street or entryway into that project, which was going to be a straight shot across Central Street, does not exist. So I think what we have to do is get a hold of all those plans. And there was some work to be done on I'm not so sure about Tosca. I don't think they didn't bite on that, but they did say they would do some improvements on Island Street. So the point is, at least in those areas, we have to get those plans out. They're relatively recent, over the last 5 years, and see what the developer was going to do as part of the project, for a couple of reasons. One, the intersection is going to be totally different. They were talking about, I believe, having lights at this new intersection they would create going into the project, and they were going to do some work on Island Street. So, before we go redesign it again, we have some plans that at least that portion looks like it would be paid for by the developer of the project. So I think we have to get a little bit more data on that in particular. Another question I had, and I think was referred to by the engineering department, it was the timing of lights. Well, I mean, some of that could be done tomorrow. It doesn't take a lot to change the timing on one of these lights. You take, for example, I think someone had mentioned, I think it was George, said, what about Central and Washington? Well, if you go up from Pearl Street to Washington Street, if you want to take a left turn onto Route 138, there is a line that you can queue up in, but, and I've counted them a million times, there's only about 3 to 6 vehicles that actually get a chance to make that turn before the light changes. Obviously, that timing should be changed. And it doesn't take a big project to do that. Also, when that intersection was redesigned by these experts at the time, there was supposed to be another lane that was going to go through to give you a turning lane going onto Route 138 to head towards Stoughton Center. But I think what happened there was it was going to be too close to that bank on the corner, so they abandoned it. So that's why we have some imperfections at that corner. The other thing I was going to ask, I've had a little experience in this area, but it goes way back to college days, so it was a while ago. But I did a year co-op with the city of Cambridge, and we did a lot of these types of things on intersections, not lights or anything like that, but trying one-way street systems, putting in islands, and we'd be in Harvard Square, Kendall Square in the middle of the night with paint cans, stanchions, and so forth, and we would put in temporary islands that were designed by the engineering department, and they would test them for a short period of time, up to 30 days, to see how they worked, and if they worked, they would be permanently put in. The point is, I think there's a lot of, at least preliminary work, that we could do with our town forces. And also, I think we really have to get a handle on what the developer is going to do for us, basically at no cost, as part of the conditions of that project. And Mr. O'Regan, I believe, was on the zoning board at that time, so he could maybe, if he feels like it, to enlighten us a little bit more about those concessions. Thank you.
Mr. O'Regan, do you?
Mr. Moderator, I was on the zoning board when the Woodbridge project went, 3 different iterations of that project. The town engineer can speak to more about the current status of it, but there is one set of issues I'd like you to be aware of concerning this request as affect the plans that the previous speaker refers to. The town in 40B projects does not have a kitty that the Zoning Board of Appeals can look to for professional design consulting services on these projects. The Zoning Board has the ability and did get funding by the proponent for peer review. And on this project, the scope of accommodations for that project did not go to the extent of the problems on that street and the Island Street intersection further down on Mill Street as probably is desirable for safety of the roadway. It was much more limited than the previous speaker might have you suggest. So there's 2 problems. One is what the town was able to do in an overall analysis through the zoning board on that particular area was limited because zoning board, A, didn't have the money, and B, it's really a jurisdictional issue about how far up and down the road the zoning board could have gone. If this plan comes better, I would expect that there would be some discussion with the holder of the permit to make it better and safer if he goes forward. And I understand there's some issues that the town engineer may refer to on the project. But that's my point on that 40B project is the work is there. I know they've seen it. And trust me, it's not enough for what we've got to do for that stretch of road.
Mr. Moderator, through to the previous speaker. I think I am correct with that the plans show that the main entrance to that project was going to be pretty much a straight shot. They were going to realign West Street at Central, and then it was going to be a straight shot across into the project. Do you recall that?
There was an entrance into the project that was across from what is now West Street. That's right.
Right. So my point is...
But that may never be built. If we wait until the proponent of the 40B project, which is now maybe 5 years since it was approved, comes forward and does the project, how many other issues do we have on that stretch of the road? I think it's irresponsible for us to wait for a 40B developer to decide that it is now profitable for him to build and allow the safety of that street to be sacrificed for the speculative purposes of whoever wants to develop that property and that property owner's good time. It's our responsibility for the safety of that street. That's what this article is
Yeah, I mean, that's obvious. And no one is questioning that. That's intuitively obvious that it's the responsibility of the town through the street commissions. But I'm saying to you is, if that road is going to be punched through into that project, then we have to make an accommodation for that. Whatever we do on the intersection, we have to be aware that it's going to go straight across the road. So if we put, say, a light there that doesn't take that into consideration, they're missing something. So what I'm saying is, we have to, I think, bring those plans to the committee and make sure that those are incorporated. And my understanding was that they were going to pay for these things, like the light. There was going to be a full working light there.
And Mr. Moderator, I think the point of the exercise is, that is one of the things this consultant is supposed to be doing for us, that we cannot do ourselves. And we can't do with the current state of things, and we can't rely on the developer to get around to doing the fixes that were proposed 5 years ago that today may no longer be what we need. So I think what you're looking for is, I would expect would be done on the Board of Selectmen. I would look for it to be done, but it can't be done if this warrant article doesn't pass.
Okay.
Mr. Laurie.
David Lurie, Precinct 6. Mr. Moderator, I just want to address town meeting. With all due respect to my previous speaker, I don't want to hear anything more about new developments in Precinct 6. We've shot it down before. These ideas come along, and nobody in this area of town wants a 40B project being built. Nobody wants it. They face resistance every time. I'm just listen, I've been at many of the meetings in the past, and I've been to master plan meetings, I've been to the finance committee hearings, and I listen to a lot of stuff being spent, and I have a very narrow focus on what I believe a town should be spending money on, and safety on our roads is a critical component of how you run a town. There's a little girl, her name is Shayla Lutz. It didn't get brought up, but this little girl, I drive by that intersection at least a couple times a day, and I've been living there for 19 years. I hold my breath every time I have to pass that intersection. I know there's many intersections that are problematic in town. This article is about design and build. That's what this is about. It's design and build. That's the kind of things that a town does for its residents. It takes care of roads and safety. This little girl should not have passed. She should not have passed away. I feel very strong about this. We should be funding this because it's the obligation of our town to do. And a lot of the things that have come along, it breaks my heart that we have to, whether it's raising taxes or borrowing money, it breaks my heart that we have to do some of those things. This is one of those things I believe that our town should be committed to doing, whether we've done studies 20 years ago, whether there's people who give us the pie-in-the-sky concepts about how to make these roads better. And there's no intersection here. There's no lights. There's no timing. There's no lights anywhere within 2 miles of that area. So lights and controlling traffic have nothing to do with this bill or this article. We need to protect people, whether they're driving or they're walking across the street. It's a school zone. It happened literally across the street from a school, an elementary school. It should not have happened. This intersection should easily be fixed with some smart people to consult about it and build it. That's what I plead with everybody here at town meeting. Make the decision to pass this article. Thank you.
I would like to remind everybody, I know we've alluded to what is supposed to happen if we hire a particular person, but the context of this article is specific just to say that we hire a traffic consultant. So that may involve other things that are not brought up, and that's up to your interpretation, but a focus should still be whether you want to hire a consultant to do this project or any other project. Mr. Smith?
I have a couple of questions to the engineer. Early in your presentation, you mentioned you wanted to protect the town.
Excuse me?
Early in your presentation, you said you wanted to protect the town, not the town's people, the town. I think you meant you wanted to protect the town's people.
Absolutely.
Am I right on that?
Absolutely.
Okay. I just wanted to correct that because,
Sorry about that.
that's all right. We all make mistakes. I have a few questions. The consultant, he's going to do a 25% presentation? That's what he's going to be paid for, just to the 25%?
Right, that's our goal, to get a 25% design
So a full
plan.
presentation would be $300,000.
It's going to be in the range of $200,000 to $300,000
All right, so this is-
approximately.
this
It
is
depends
just-
what the design's going to consist of.
Okay, so this is just to get him started?
Yes.
Okay, but this is just to do the design process. The construction will all be paid for by the state and federal?
Absolutely.
Okay. Was another question. All these task force, what did they come up with?
What did the task force come up with?
Yeah.
This
To hire a
present-
consultant?
This presentation is on behalf of the engineering department and the transportation task force.
And all they could come up with was to hire a consultant?
Well, what our goals are is to fix the transportation issues in town, and because of, staff issues and whatnot, we don't have a traffic engineer on staff in town. We need to hire one.
All right, so this is going to be a traffic engineer that you're hiring, or we're just paying him part-time?
This is going to be a
It's just a
consultant who
consultant.
does traffic engineering analysis and design.
Okay, so all the task force and the engineering could come up with was hire a consultant?
No, we came up with goals and objectives. This was our top goal for intersection and roadway treatment. We're very new, it's a new task force, so we plan on getting a priority list together. This was our top priority, and actually getting some public input for sidewalks. We want to get a plan together for prioritizing sidewalks. That'll be part of this task force, along with the other intersections in town. And this only includes, would include intersections that are town-owned, not state-owned. As you know, currently, the Washington and Central Street intersection is getting done by the state. We don't have to pay a dollar for that, so we stay away from the state roads. There'll be other tasks, but right now we want to focus on sidewalks and intersections and go from there.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Murphy?
Peter Murphy, Precinct 2. We do not have a quorum to listen to this, but I sat as a resident to your presentation. And $75,000 is just a portion. This is opening up the door. A door that has been closed, not opened, and we keep throwing a blind eye up to it. As you drive through the town, we don't have sidewalks where we should have them. We have more people out doing recreational walking, riding bikes. There's grants out there to support that. We have no one to follow up on that. The engineer and myself, we have had several conversations about lights that are in the town. A business will come in and they'll give the town a set of lights. I believe one of the, Larry Barrett, he was going to be given a set of lights, and Larry said, no, you are responsible for maintaining that light. Again, we get back to these developments come in, do what they want, and we have no evidence or nothing to come back for further mitigation after the fact. $75,000 is money well spent. We are going to spend a lot more money. We are a growing town. We have a $78 million budget. This is just a drop in the bucket. We talk about safety. We worry about our kids. School buses. If you want to go look at the school buses, my kids were picked up in front of their house, in front of my house, Peters Drive. The buses came down there. Because of the cuts, trying to be more efficient, I see all the kids out in Turnpike Street. There's no place for them to stand. There's no sidewalks for them to walk out into this, to walk to the bus stop. I'm sure that's throughout the whole town. So again, these are just bullet points that the engineer could throw together to justify this. I'm in support of this, and I think it's long overdue. Thank you.
Mrs. Camacho.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. To add to this, rather than repeat, the $75,000 is, I need the technical word again, is that the preliminary plan? Is that what it's called in engineering? There are 4 phases?
It's called the 25% design plan.
All right. So shouldn't the article have in it that it is for the 25% design plan? Because otherwise, one might think that you're getting the entire design for the $75,000, which is not true. And there is nothing in this article that tells us that it is just for the 25% design plan.
Yeah, the $75,000 is a ballpark number right now. We have to hire a traffic engineer and consultant to help us with this process to establish the exact number. With $75,000, we will be able to get a 25% design plan completed. The priority number 2, the signal timing, whatever's left out of that $75,000, we'll be able to get more or less done in that priority number 2. So for instance, if we used $65,000 for the 25% design plan, we'd have $10,000 towards the signal timing. We may use almost all of it up with the 25% design plans. We don't know what that cost is right now because we need to get costs from the traffic engineer.
And if you decide to, as there have been previous speakers this evening, mention several locations within the town to keep the townspeople safe, that being mentioned as the function, then this could even pay for only a partial part of that preliminary design. So your end cost of the design could run way over even $300,000. That's my concern, is what's going to be the bottom ticket price here for all of this? We don't know what that is. And as you say, it's very, very open-ended. I don't like things that are open-ended. I like things to be exact when we're talking dollars and cents in the town, especially in this economy. So I think that there should be something that defines exactly what this $75,000 is going to cover. So I would vote against this until I know exactly what this is going to cover, because I don't know where it's going to stop, and I don't know what it will cover. Thank you.
Mr. Scardino.
Joe Scardino, Precinct 1, Chairman of the Master Plan Committee and Chairman of the Planning Board. This process is somewhat similar to the master plan process, except Mr. Tisdale is talking about the end of our master plan, which is implementation. That's another figure on top of the consulting that leads you up once you have a game plan together to get to the end result. The other point I want to make is that the state grants come about. You have to be shovel-ready. There are federal programs that come about. Again, you have to be shovel-ready. Your project has to be designed and ready to go. You can't be ready to go unless you have the design specs in place for the project. You can't tackle a project that's going to require millions of dollars in construction costs and employ a team of consultants and just send them out there. It's a step-by-step process, just like the master plan. We're on the right road. Let's continue.
Any further comments? If not,
Mr. Batchelor.
Mr. Batchelor.
I'd just like to hopefully answer one of the previous speaker's questions. We have Old Colony Planning Council is looking into all intersections from the Avon line to the Canton line off of Central Street right now. All of that is going to help us do whatever we need to do with some of these intersections. We're going to have a lot of information that's given to us that we don't have to pay for. We're extremely confident that the amount of money that Mr. Tisdale is asking for tonight will definitely take care of the 25% design. I'm quite sure that we won't go over that budget. The other thing, some of the other points were, when we're talking about the traffic lights, a lot of them were affected by the intersection at Central and Washington Street the last time it was designed. It's a state intersection. There's nothing we can do as far as changing those lights. But when that was redesigned the last time, it affected our other intersections. And that's what we're trying to work with right now to fix the timing. And they're coming back and they're redesigning that intersection again, which is saving us money because it's going to cost them probably $2 to $3 million to do that intersection over. But this is also part of our process. The intersections that are out away from that one intersection are all affected by what they do at Central and Wash. So, again, that is part of this study. I hope you support it. The Board of Selectmen is behind us, the town manager is behind us, and hopefully you'll be behind us.
Any further comments? Did I hear that? All those in favor of cutting off debate, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion carries. On the motion, which only requires a majority vote, is that the town vote to appropriate $75,000 to pay for the hiring of a qualified consultant to provide traffic-related engineering analysis, design, and surveying services, and that to meet this appropriation, $75,000 be transferred from free cash. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Well, I'm going to declare it a vote anyways. Not unanimous, but it's there. Article 61.
That the town will vote in accordance with General Laws, Chapter 80, Section 13, to authorize the Board of Selectmen, acting as water commissioners, to direct that betterment assessments made to recover the cost of extending municipal water service to the Bishop's Landing condominium shall bear interest either at a rate of 5% or at a rate equal to 2% above the rate of interest chargeable to the town for borrowing to complete this project or take any other action relative thereto.
Any discussion? Mr. Fian.
Motion to dismiss.
Okay, the question I have, because it's a motion to dismiss, is there a reason for that, just so that?
Yes, we were advised by town council that we could not loan the money at 2%. And that's provided in this article.
So therefore, it is really an out-of-order article. On the motion to dismiss, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? No. I'm going to declare it a vote to dismiss.
Yes.
Unless somebody really... I'm going to... Article 62, Mr. Hill.
That the town vote to accept the provisions of Mass General Law, Chapter 40, Section 42K, pertaining to the assessment of betterments for the construction and connection of water services.
Any discussion? Mr. Fan? Well, that's what,
Page 257.
This actually came up as we were discussing the prior article regarding a loan to Bishop's Landing for waterworks. And there was a lot of discussion about that loan to Bishop's Landing, and during the course of the discussion, we went to town council a few times for advice. And during his review, town council identified a certain provision in the state law that the town never accepted, that they should accept, that would be better and further equip the town. I think the thing is that the town really has not charged betterments on waterworks in the recent past, and maybe, I don't know how long. You know, we're always talking about sewer betterments, but you never hear the word water betterment. And this particular article covers the assessment of water betterments in case we ever want to do it in the future. Now, we just dismissed the prior article, but this council still recommends you have this, adopt this so it's in the books in case it's ever done in the future. I recommend you pass the article.
any further discussion? I heard that. All those in favor of cutting off the debate, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion is carried. On the motion, it only requires a majority vote. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, I'll declare it a vote. Article 63, we're into capital outlay articles. Mr. Hill.
That the town vote to appropriate $40,000 to replace the existing command vehicle, and that to meet this appropriation, the treasurer, with the approval of the Board of Selectmen, be authorized to borrow $40,000 under General Law, Chapter 44, Section 7, Paragraph 9, or any other enabling authority.
Does the chief wish to explain this?
I believe the article is pretty self-explanatory, and I'm going to be sincere, brief, and then be seated, as the sign says. I'll just accept any questions from the town meeting members.
Mr. Coleman?
Eric Coleman, Precinct 5. Usually in these articles, we're told what year the vehicle is that we're replacing. Do we have a year on that?
The current vehicle is a 2006 Ford Expedition, but that will be rotated down to a vehicle to be used by one of our day staff members. This particular vehicle that then we will be trading in another one of our 1997 GMC Jimmys with 140,000 miles on it.
So how many miles does this one have on it, or is that?
Currently a little over 80,000.
Now, there was 5 votes in the Finance Committee against this. Could we hear as to why that might be through the Finance Committee Chairman?
Mr. Hill?
There was a general discussion about how these cars were getting replaced and which one eventually was going to be replaced and substituted out. The general conclusion here is that the average age of the fire vehicles is 14 years. 14 years old, the average life of the passenger vehicles in the fire department. So again, there was discussion about replacing this car, but it's passed down to another car that's going to get replaced. It was a little bit confusing, I think, along the way, but at the end of the day, the Finance Committee voted to approve this.
It sounds like that's the vote that was for it. I'd like to know from somebody what the vote against it would be, and maybe follow that logic, if anybody voted against it that's here.
Mr. Guerin?
Jim Guerin, Precinct 6. I was one of the ones that voted against this, primarily because we voted a vehicle for the fire department last year, and when I asked the chief whether he had received it or not, he said no, they had not as yet, after 1 year, received the vehicle. My comment to that was, I vote for these things here because I think the vehicles are required. But if we can vote for something and then it can sit idle for a year and nothing's being done on it, I figure the vehicle's not necessary. I voted against it. Thank you.
Can we have a comment on that, please?
If I may, through
Mr. Zoll.
the chair. Those particular, there are two vehicles, we have them on the road right now that were approved last year. Those were the two hybrid vehicles. What happened was the original vote was for a Ford Focus, the Ford Escape hybrid vehicles, but Ford stopped production of them halfway through the year. So we had to re-put together the bid and go out for the Ford Focus hybrids. By the way, they average around 49 miles a gallon around town right now.
Mr. Murphy.
Through you, Mr. Moderator, point of clarification. The way this article is written, it says to replace the existing command vehicle. If that was the case, is that the vehicle that now has to be taken out of service and replaced, because it says replace that existing vehicle? I understand what the chief said about he's doing some shuffling of vehicles. In my opinion, the article should have been written to replace the vehicle that is being dismissed of.
Sort of it's where the replacement is being replaced, right?
Exactly, where it says replace the existing command vehicle, that's the vehicle that has to go according to the article.
Is that correct? You are going to change the...
We're replacing the vehicle that's used now every day by the incident commander, the captain that's in the car all day long. I don't know if that's legally, the wording is proper. I don't know who I would defer that to.
Well, town council can answer that. I know several times we've had this discussion.
While town council's getting up to the mic and readjusting the mic, we had asked for a list of vehicles that are throughout the town, just for this reason, so we know which vehicles are being taken out of service and which ones are coming into service. He's ready.
Through you, Mr. Moderator, I was just going to say that, in my opinion, this is worded all right. It seems to me that it's saying that the vehicle it's referred to as the command vehicle, this money would be to buy a new vehicle for that purpose. I don't think it mandates that the existing one be traded in or anything else. I think the town can handle that vehicle the way it wants.
I think where some of the confusion comes in is over the years, vehicles would come up, and DPW has had many vehicles shuffled in and out. The police department has had many vehicles that have been pushed along, and only to find they move from the police department over the town or whatever, and someone's looking for more money to replace a vehicle that has 150,000, where 2 weeks before it had 140, but it's the same vehicle. That's where the confusion comes in. And that's why I ask about, it's targeting a specific vehicle. It now becomes a question. Thank you.
Mr. Moderator, if I could, to address some of the previous speakers' questions. I have already spoken to the town manager as far as the process that has been in place and to avoid this confusion. And there will be a better policy on vehicle management in place by the time we come before you next year to avoid these very things. It's the town manager's responsibility to manage the assets of the town. And as I say, I've had this discussion from when he first came in and even a little bit more tonight, and he will have a better handle on this. And I know the Finance Committee has put together a list with the cooperation of all the town departments to get a better handle on what cars are here and be able to make better judgments when departments are coming before them. But, and I'll leave that to the speaker who wants to talk, otherwise I'll be in trouble when I go home. But just to be clear, the town manager is fully aware of some of the issues that have come before town meeting with the vehicles, and we will certainly have a way to manage them and be much clearer to you when they're coming for cars, which it is. For this particular article, I think it is getting into semantics. The chief is replacing a particular vehicle, and that's the vehicle that he's replacing. Now, you could say that it could have been, I'm replacing this with this one, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, and you are getting into some semantics, but the town manager is aware of this issue, and I believe the chief just explained it to you. Yes, he's replacing that car. He will rotate that down, and another one is going to be, I believe he said, traded in or sent to the pool if it can be used. We've already had a report from the town manager that some of the cars that are being recycled are good enough to ride around town, that's it. So he's already in that process of looking into what we're going to do with the fleet we have and what we can actually either auction off, recover some funds, and help along with the fleet.
Just for clarification, again, at the public hearing, I am not opposed to getting the vehicle. I'm just questioning the wording that was put, and maybe it should have been rephrased differently. That's all. Thank you.
Mrs. Anzavino.
I took all of the vehicles. We now have a spreadsheet. I'm keeping track of every single one. It's up on the website. Every single car that's being asked for this year now has next to it that it's this year, what article replaced it. It'll be available every single year, so there will no longer be any of this questions about whether or not we're replacing the same vehicle countless times.
Mr. DeFelice.
Mr. Moderator, to the chief, where do you anticipate this vehicle that you have now, that's going to go where?
That'll replace currently the day staff, the EMS lieutenant, drives the 1997 GMC Jimmy, and that'll take the place of that.
Okay, so this is not going to end up behind the armory with the other 30-plus vehicles that are there now?
No, sir. As a matter of fact, when we took delivery of the two hybrids, we were able to get MHQ, which happens to be one of the state vendors, to take 3 vehicles in trade.
Yeah, those are Fusions, right?
The current ones, yes.
Yeah.
Mr. Carrara.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. There shouldn't be any confusion over the cars and what we're replacing. There is a voted policy by the Board of Selectmen up here, and they should know it because I was on the board when we voted it. So it should be in there, it should be known that the policy is when you replace a vehicle, it either gets traded, auctioned, or junked. That's the vote of this board here that is part of the town's rules and regulations that's in the Selectmen's policy book. That's how it goes. If you want to replace a vehicle, a GMC Jimmy, tell them you're going to replace the GM. No disrespect to you, Chief. Tell them you're going to replace the GMC Jimmy. It's junk, but we need this for our person. We're rotating down. I hate to say this, but I bet you we replaced that 1971 sidewalk tractor at least 11 times since I was on the board of Selectmen. It's just amazing how many times I see things coming up. I mean, here comes John.
That was in 1972 that you did that 11 times.
All right, sorry about that.
But it's gone now.
That's it. This is, I can see where people are coming, and I can tell you right now, I'm going to open my mouth now because I didn't really hammer when I was up there because I didn't have much support. Some stuff is constant. We replace it, and it has a longevity of like 10 more years. And then we replace it again. I'm not going to go into it, but if you want something and you're going to junk something or it's junk, just spell it out. Don't say we're going to release the command, then we don't have to sit here for hours and hours figuring out who's got more mileage on what and who's getting what truck. Just say it's junk, it's got to go. Don't rotate it down. I don't know if it can work 2 days a week or 3 days a week. We're paying for it to be replaced. We don't, so that means those 2 vehicles are still on the road, rolling along. So that's all I want to tell you. There is a policy by these guys. They don't have to fix anything. They don't have to talk to anybody. It was voted by another board. That's what you go by. Thank you.
Any further discussion? If not, anybody want to make that word? All those in favor of cutting off debate, say aye. Aye. All those opposed, motion cut off debate carries. On the original, if this is not unanimous, I will take a standing count. It is a borrowing article. It needs a recording number if it is not unanimous. All those in favor of appropriating $40,000 to replace the existing command vehicle and to borrow $40,000 to do so. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed. I will declare it unanimous. Article 64.
That the town vote to appropriate $110,000 to replace the existing firefighters' protective clothing, 52 sets, and that to meet this appropriation, the treasurer, with the approval of the Board of Selectmen, be authorized to borrow $110,000 under General Law, Chapter 44, Section 7, Paragraph 9, or any other enabling authority.
Chief?
This is the protective firefighting gear that we wear on approximately 73% of our calls and our responses. It's the coats that we wear, also the pants. The current ones we have are 8 years old. The new standards, the NFPA standards, which we go by, will provide us with bloodborne pathogen liners, as well as the 4 chemical resistant liners to this particular gear. And the typical life cycle in a department as busy as ours is approximately 7 years.
Mr. Rock?
John Rock, Precinct 3. I have a comment and a question. I'm going to vote for this. I'm all for this. Perhaps, my comment is, perhaps in the future we should include items like this in the operations budget. So that's my comment. I mean, we should try and do that as much as feasibly possible throughout these articles. The other question is, through you, Mr. Moderator, to the Finance Committee. You recommended, previous article and this article, that a portion of this be paid back from the ambulance fund. Now, can that happen? Does that have to be part of the motion, or, I mean, it seems like a good idea to me. Is it just like a wish, or what?
Mr. Hill, could you respond? Or
Well,
Mr.
that
Rock?
was our recommendation, so we would expect that half of this be charged off to the enterprise borrowing account, and that the rest be paid off from general borrowing, because there is a source of revenue in the enterprise account for the ambulance.
And so that will happen based on your recommendation?
I would, Bill?
Mr. Rowe?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Moderator, we have done this before. We've split articles between fire and ambulance. What happens is the treasurer will just inform the financial advisor, and they will set up, it'll be one bond. It's one general obligation bond for the town, but they will set up separate amortization schedules for both fire and ambulance. So then we just split it that way. We've done that before, so.
Okay, thanks.
On the motion to cut off debate, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? The motion carries to cut off debate. On the motion to appropriate $110,000 to replace existing firefighters' protective clothing and authorize the borrowing of $110,000. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? I declare it unanimous. Article 65. Mr. Hill. Oh, no, I'm going to require that from the town manager. Because right now I have a negative. I need somebody to dismiss this, if it's going to be dismissed.
Mr. Moderator,
Ms. Walsh.
Cynthia Walsh, Precinct 2, move to dismiss.
On the motion to dismiss, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. Article 66.
That the town vote to appropriate $5,300 to replace the existing rescue boat, and that to meet this appropriation, $5,300 be transferred from free cash.
Mr. Chief?
That is to replace the current inflatable boat that we have. It was purchased in 1995. The outboard motor on it is still in perfect working condition, and the trailer that we trailer it on is also in perfect working condition. Has multiple dry rot. We've sent it out repair a few times in the past, and we have multiple leaks. We have to continue to fill this boat at the minimum once a day with air. So I'm just looking to replace that.
Mr. DeFelice?
Mr. Moderator, through you to the chief. Chief, when's the last time you used the boat? The one you have now?
Let's see, I believe January.
And typically, what would that be used for?
Not only for water rescue or water recovery, we more often go into water recovery. We use boat in the water.
Very good. I like that. I knew there was a reason why you were the chief. Is this going to be like one of those Zodiac type boats, that type of thing? Or?
Correct. We
Yeah.
found that previously. I'm trying to think. Before we had that, we had a flat bottom John type of boat. It really wasn't that steady, and for the amount of equipment that we put inside the boat to actually transport to the scene to use as part of in a rescue or recovery operation, we found the Zodiac boat to be best for us as far as the stability, also lightweight, so we can pick it up and carry it, because as you know, most of the waterways in Stoughton, as much as they're not large, they don't have boat ramps to just back it in nice and smooth.
Yeah, and some of our ponds, if we don't dredge them soon, you can just almost walk across them in the weeds. Thank
Out
you.
of order.
Mr. Soros?
Joe Soares, Precinct 2. Chief Doloff was very kind to give me a tour of the fire station. And I saw the boat. And I guess every day he has to fill it up with air. Is that correct, Chief?
That's correct.
So if the boat's not filled up with air, kind of hard to save somebody's life?
That would be correct.
I would agree to this. Thank you.
Thank you.
As to cut off debate, all those in favor of cutting off debate, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion carries. On the appropriation of $5,300 for the boat, and that this money be transferred from free cash, all those in favor, say aye. Aye. All those opposed, the motion carries. It's unanimous. Article 67.
Just a thought, Mr. Moderator. Could we make a motion to suspend the rules and consider 67 and 68 together?
You may. In fact, it's a good idea. I even got that in my notes. All those in favor of doing Article 67 and 68 together for discussion? Wait a minute. See, no, let's keep it at 67 and 68.
On the motion?
Yes.
Okay. So I'll read both motions, if that makes sense, and then we
Yeah.
can go to discussion and vote. So the first one on Article 67 is that the town vote to appropriate $60,000 for design and construction of repairs to the kitchen and living area of Fire Station 1, and to meet this appropriation, $60,000 be transferred from free cash. Article 68, that the town vote to appropriate $60,000 for design and construction for repairs to the bathroom and living areas of Fire Station 1, and to meet this appropriation, $60,000 be transferred from free cash.
And Article 68,
That was Article 68. I did read both of them.
oh, all right, I'm just doing the paperwork here, too. Okay, on the discussion. Chief?
One word to describe the current living conditions for the members of the fire department of Station 1 is deplorable. Deplorable. I would like to thank, first of all, the members of town meeting who took the time to come up and view the deplorable conditions at Station 1. We did have some money approved from a previous town meeting from the townwide building committee report. No, it's not the proper feasibility, thank you, report. And we should be starting some repairs soon. But that money approved was not approved for any repairs to the living area on the second floor. I broke it up into two different articles because what I've learned, the way the town borrows money, I didn't know if the process, if we'd only get a certain portion approved at one time and the town would only want to borrow $60,000 at one point, and then by the time we were ready to do the second part of the repair, they'd borrow it at another point. I could have been wrong in the way I worded that. So that's why there's two separate articles, because I felt as though the repairs would probably be done in two parts, because we have to maintain operations through the repairs. We won't be closing the station for the repairs. The members will still be operating while the repairs are underway.
So, Chief, just a point of interest, information, that the recommendation was to pay cash for both of these, so that you could do them simultaneously if you so chose. And on page 227 in the back of your book is any of the reference material, some of the information that the chief has already gotten from Daniel Architects, et cetera, detailing some of the changes that need to be made.
I'd be more than happy to entertain any questions at this time.
Mr. Murphy?
First of all, I want to thank Captain Jasmine. I was up there, and I did not go with the group. I was not able to attend that, but he gave me a tour of this firehouse. And as a town, we should be totally ashamed of the way we have employees come in, work for us, and the way we're treating them. We had an article come before us about the town in the Bill of Rights, so to speak, that we're going to tell the different unions, this is what we expect from you. The employees have the other side of what they expect from us. Good, clean, workable conditions to work in. What I saw there, I'm glad I didn't take pictures. If our building inspector went in there, he would shut the building down. He would condemn it. And I know the question's going to come up, or the statement's going to come up. We're looking at $120,000 in a building that we want to tear down. Well, in reality, over the years that I've been a town meeting member, money has been asked for to do repairs. And at times we've given them money, and other times we said, no, we're going to tear that down. If we were to tell the fire chief we're going to give him a new fire station tomorrow, he wouldn't see it for 5 years by the time you go through development, planning, building, and everything else. So in the meantime, these firemen who save lives, put their own lives at risk, have to live in these conditions. What I saw, and I'm sure other people say it, the bathrooms, I will say this about the chief. The area was clean, neat, and respectable as well as it could be. But what I also saw was conditions that you cannot do without major dollars to fix and repair. I commend your firemen for working those conditions. Thank you.
Mr. Smith?
Well, I did have a chance to photograph it, thanks to the chief gave me access, and it's on SMAC if anybody cares about it. It's called Firehouse, and it's video on demand. But anyways, you mentioned the previous money that was allocated for the station, $130,000, I believe it was?
Yes, sir.
And you've already spent some of that on a consultant and design and
Correct. And
20,000 or
and the
10?
remainder is going to be spent on roof repair and the apparatus bay floor.
All right, that hole in the floor? Wonderful. I was at a meeting with the, when we were talking about the fire station, and the purchasing agent mentioned that there could have been a problem because of these two articles and the amount of money that was involved and what would have to happen. Is she here? Is that possible to get a discussion on that?
She is not. I believe what she was referring to at the time is, it's not 30B, 149? Chapter 149, to do with construction projects in the town. If the whole project as a whole,
Was
and
above a certain
someone from
amount?
finance, correct me if I'm wrong, if project as a whole goes above $100,000, you have to have a design consultant or an engineer doing designs. And that was that day. I remember you being in the room. That's what she was referring to.
But it was already above 100,000 at that point, so that must have been something else.
Well, no, the money approved was over 100,000,
Right.
but we weren't sure if we were looking at piecing it out to maybe expedite the process of not having to have an engineer consultant, and that's when she corrected us and said, you have to look at the project as a whole, and if the whole project comes above $100,000, that's when you have to,
All
the
right, and
procurement laws.
that's where these would take you way above that.
Correct.
Right, okay. Well, I hope you get the money. We need it. And that building has to be repaired, because even when you're finished with it, it will have value to somebody. You know, it's not, I don't think it's just going to be torn down. Somebody will take it over, and we have to maintain value in that piece of property. Thank you.
Mr. Feaster?
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. Joseph Feaster, Precinct 4. This was a commitment that was made to our men and women who work in our fire department last year. And as many of the previous speakers have said, and as the chief has said, the conditions under which they work in that particular building are deplorable. And as a result of that, we're asking, and I see as we've been in town meeting and as we've discussed, we've talked about different things as far as saving monies, as far as the vehicles that we will purchase. But the reality is that we're talking about our own townspeople, we're talking about persons who are protecting our lives, and this is a no-brainer as far as I am concerned. If you go down there and look at what they have, what conditions they have to work under and live under. Now, the previous money that was spent got us to a point where we could do some of the things that were appropriated by town meeting in the past. Again, it was a tip in the bucket. I think it was something like $100 and something thousand. So with respect to Article 68, I think it's a no-brainer. These are the people who provide services to us, and we ought to respect what they have done. And on a personal note, I know for me, I made a personal commitment to those firemen and firewomen when they came and asked me, could we do something along with the chief as far as the conditions there. Secondly, on the feasibility, if we're going to be a town that's going to begin to look at it and look at the whole town, it has already been determined that the reality for us to go from the north and south side of town is going to be difficult unless we begin to look at other alternatives as to where we can place our fire, and possibly looking at a total public safety building for both police and fire. A lot of people may come and start saying, well, you know, we plan and we put on the shelf, but this is a reality, something that we want to bring to fruition. The chief spent quite a bit of time, along with the town engineer and others, trying to look at locations where it might be appropriate for us to site such a facility. Some of the discussion has certainly been around two places. One has been the Armory, the other has been Line Lumber Road. So the reality is that I think, again, we have to be proactive, we have to be prospective in the sense of what we're looking at, because this is a town that's growing, this is a town that's going to have additional needs, the marketplace is changing, there are additional developments and housing that's coming in here, and we need to make sure that we have the proper facilities for our men and women in the fire department to work. So I hope that you will support both of these articles.
Mr. Soros.
Well, I think I can speak for Mr. Soros. We both were going to get up here and say the same things that the other speakers have eloquently have spoken of, but just to add to the numbers, we have to take responsibility for the maltreatment of these people that we asked to save our lives. And I ask that you vote for these two articles, and I move the question.
You can't do that after you've spoken. So somebody else, Mr. Snyder, has to cut off debate. We're cutting off debate on both articles, but we'll vote them separately. All those in favor of cutting off debate, say aye. Aye. All those opposed. On Article 67, which is to make repairs to the Fire Station 1 kitchen and living area and to appropriate $60,000, which will be transferred from free cash. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? I will declare it as approved. Article 68, which is to appropriate $60,000 for design and construction for repairs to the bathrooms and living area of Fire Station 1, and to meet this appropriation, $60,000 be transferred from free cash. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? The motion is carried. And I will declare it unanimous. And that completes that. Now, one more. Article 69, Mr. Hill.
That the town vote to appropriate $60,000 to pay for a feasibility study to construct and equip a fire station or combined public safety facility for fire and police departments, and that to meet this appropriation, $60,000 be transferred from free cash.
Any discussion? Mr. Dowell, Chief.
The original article, when I approached the Board of Selectmen back in, I believe it was January, we were looking at just the fire station feasibility study. That's why the title of this article states that. And you see in the wording and the explanation that it talks about a public safety facility. What we hope to accomplish is to hire an outside firm, a professional organization that's all they do is they take the data that we present them, the police chief and myself. We do in-house needs assessments. And what we expect from this study is we hope to accomplish putting together a combined building, public safety facility. One thing, we want to look at the future needs of the town. For instance, the current building we're at on Freeman Street, that's been a 100-year building for the town. I think we need to look forward and look at a 100-year public safety building. We have to look at for the proper location that this building will be placed. We have to look at the ideal optimal response times. We want this feasibility study to also give us cost estimates, the amount of land we need to put a facility on. And we're going to combine our dispatch operation. That's already on the table. We've already discussed that. We need to locate a Emergency Operations Center, which would be exactly adjacent to the Combined Dispatch Center. And it would also help us with the control of duplication of services. We feel as though we can deliver a better public safety product from the police and fire departments. Because on a regular basis, the police and fire department work together hand in hand in multiple responses throughout the town. There'll be multiple shared resources within the building, classrooms, conference room. We also look at succession planning to do with our clerical staff and our administrative staff. And that's what we're hoping to get out of having a feasibility study done by a professional organization. Thank you.
Mr. DeFelice.
Dear Mr. Murray, to the Chief. Chief, could you explain to us some of your responsibilities as far as the highways? I know like each town has a section of highway that goes through their town. For example, on Route 24, where does your responsibility begin and end on 24?
We typically, depending whether we get a call for a southbound or northbound accident, we'll enter on, if it's a call for a southbound accident between exit 19A and 19B or 21, we will get on at 139 and head south. Avon will get on at Central Street, head north. Randolph will get on at 139 and head north. And then Canton will also come if it's further up on 24 in the Canton area next to the second Blue Hills that they built out of trash. That's all Canton property. So it depends on the call. It comes through from the state police. They'll give different mile markers, and then we divide it up by response from there.
The other question I had, one of the comments earlier was one of the locations would be Line Lubber Road. And I thought we had already had that discussion. Is that the property that the school owns? Are we still looking at that?
That's correct, and that was
Mr.
on the
Moderator,
table.
This is out of order. This is
No, it's
just
not.
to-
We're
this
talking
is
about the
just to-
feasibility
this is
study,
just to
aren't we?
commit to buy a feasibility study.
Yeah,
This isn't to
well, I'm
go through
asking questions
all the
about the
list of
feasibility
consent-
study.
all possible areas.
I believe that.
Part of, oh, I'm sorry.
The question is, it was made a reference of relocating and finding a location, and Mr. DeFelice has the right to ask that question.
It was brought up.
But this is for a feasibility study.
That's right. That's
Why are
what
we
we're
going
talking
to
about.
discuss all the possible locations? We're not qualified to do that.
So that is so that, I guess what I'm asking is, at a previous town meeting, we discussed that, and I remember the superintendent adamantly saying that the school was going to retain their right to the property. So is that still one of the feasible?
First of all, we have to see what properties would lie. It might involve eminent domain, taking a property. I don't know that. That's why we hire a professional consultant to do that. What we go forward with is we tell them what our needs are going to be. We want to look forward. What are our needs going to be? How much land will we need to meet those needs? And I have to look at response time, so we still fall within ISO, which is an insurance underwriting agency, and they look at response times. They come in and review the town every, I believe it's 10 years, and that affects your insurance rate. So we just can't randomly pick a spot because we think it's a nice piece of land to put a fire station, because we have to be concerned with response times and the road miles to get to different locations. Not just as the crow flies, but the actual traveled road miles come into that equation. There's multiple things that come into this equation. NFPA recommendations for response times and how many pieces of apparatus can get there within a certain amount of time. That's why we want to do the feasibility study.
Right. Chief, given the bad luck we've had with Station 2, with the police station, relatively recent buildings, what's your opinion of the feasibility of the Armory? It's like, at some point, we have to make a decision, don't we?
All right. It's a general study, and I think if we're getting into too much
Is
detail.
is that going to be studied too?
It would probably, everything can be studied. I mean,
Okay.
we have
The reason-
16.3 square miles that we can study.
The reason I brought that up, my understanding was that the town acquired that building like for a very small amount, like $1, for public safety. So, seeing that that was acquired for public safety, I would think that that has to be near the top of the list. Thank you.
Ms. Walsh.
Cynthia Walsh, Precinct 2. Could we please move the question?
That's to cut off debate. All those in favor of cutting off debate, say aye. Aye. All those opposed? On the motion to cut off, it is all done. I'm just reading faster than I should. On the motion to appropriate $60,000 to pay for feasibility study to construct and equip a fire station or combined public safety facility for fire and police departments, and to meet this appropriation, $60,000 be transferred for free cash. That all requires a majority vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? I would declare it unanimous.
Oh, that, you didn't vote against it?
Mrs. Carrara.
For the 1,200th time.
Yes. No, Mr. Anzavino is correct, but I'm also looking at the number of people still here. And so, I will declare the meeting adjourned at 10:34.